The readings for this feast of Christ the King evoke three images of Christ as King. All of them are to some extent paradoxical because they emphasize things we don't usually associate with kings. They also tell us that we have already met King Jesus, even if we don't realize it. Let's look at these three images of our Lord Jesus Christ, King, not only of all creation, but as our prayer puts it, of the universe. The first reading from Ezekiel speaks of the Lord as a shepherd who cares for his flock, a caring king. Some of the lines summarize that care. I myself will look after and tend my sheep, etc. In the modern world, we don't typically think of kings and heads of state in such a caring role. Most world leaders are inaccessible to us, existing behind many layers of security and staff. Even bishops of larger dioceses are hard to reach personally. Jesus, however, is a king who is more present to us than we are to ourselves. An old revival hymn says, Jesus is on the main line. Call him up and tell him what you want. Another song says, God is just one prayer away. In the ancient world, it was much more common to speak of a caring king. Most kings had more immediate contact with their subjects. Many had certain days on which their subjects could line up to talk to them. It is said that St. Athanasius ran up to the emperor on his horse one day, grabbed the reins, and proceeded to debate a theological point with him. Until relatively recently, even United States presidents had office hours. It is said that on Tuesdays, Abraham Lincoln received visitors from among the citizenry who sought to speak to him of their concerns. They would line up at the door without formal appointments, and he'd listen to them one by one. The idea of a king who cares for his people personally is somewhat paradoxical to us today, but Jesus does care for his people. Did you notice the last line of the passage from Ezekiel? But the sleek and the strong I will destroy, shepherding them rightly. Yes, God is a caring king. Some of his ways are paradoxical. Do not reduce the noun care merely to meaning that he comforts and consoles. It can be that, but not always. Sometimes the caring thing to do is to rebuke, to warn, or even punish. God never ceases to care for us. Finally, note that Jesus exercises this care through his body, the church. This means all of us, not just clergy, parents, elders, youngsters, and all are surrounded to share, are summoned to share the faith, to console and care, to find the lost and straying, and correct the sinner. We are Christ's voice, his heart, his hands. Today's second reading speaks of Jesus' victory over all things, saying he has been raised from the dead, the first fruits of those who have fallen asleep. And he has reversed what Adam did, that he is the first fruits. Then each one in proper order will also rise. It says he will hand the kingdom over to God his Father when he has destroyed every sovereignty and every authority and power, that he must reign until it has all put all his enemies under his feet, the last enemy to be destroyed being death. Here too is a great paradox. As Hebrews says, in putting everything under him, God left nothing that is not subject to him. Yet at present we do not see everything subject to him. But we see Jesus, who was made a little lower than the angels, now crowned with glory and honor because he suffered death. So while at times it seems that evil triumphs, God is working. One by one, he is putting all his enemies under his feet. One day, even death itself will be destroyed. The paradox of the cross shouts to us that God conquers, not by brutality and cruel strength, but by love, forgiveness, mercy, things the world dismisses as weak. Unlike worldly kings, this conquering king does not force us to be his subjects and live in his kingdom. Earthly kings conquer regions and force peoples under their rule by might. But Jesus is the king who respects our freedom to decide whether to have him as our king and to accept the virtues of his kingdom or not. Hence, hell is not so much a place of punishment as it is a place for those who refuse, those who say no to Christ and his kingdom. This king, though all-powerful, does not force his kingship and laws. He offers them to all and allows each of us to decide. Finally, our gospel teaches us that Christ will come again to judge the living and the dead. In this second coming, we will discover that we have known him all along, though in a paradoxical way. As Christ comes and takes his seat and all are summoned to him, we're going to have a strange sense that we've met him before, and he will confirm that. For indeed, we have all met his majesty, and he is the strangest king of all. He is a king who is hungry, thirsty, sick, lonely, a foreigner, in prison, in a stranger. The list he gives should not be seen as exhaustive, for he is in the needy, whether rich or poor. He is in the discouraged loved one who cannot find a job. He is in our children who need to be taught and encouraged. He is in the co-worker who lost his wife. He is in the patient who was diagnosed with cancer. He is in the lost family member who needs instruction and to be drawn back to the sacraments. He is even in you and me, in our struggles and needs. Yes, we have met this king every day, and he is not merely saying that these people have some moral union with him. He is saying mystically that he is each one of them. And when we cared for them, we were not simply doing something ethical. We were serving and caring for him who did it for me. What a strange king. We usually picture kings in palaces far removed from trouble, but this king is naked, poor, hungry, and thirsty. We walk past him every day. To those who have cared for him in his poor, he says, he will never forget what they have done. The poor may not be able to repay us, but King Jesus will repay us 1,000,000-fold. On the day of our judgment, we will look at Jesus and say, I know you, I recognize you. And he will say, I know you too. Come, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. We should not view this judgment scene as containing the only standards by which we are to be judged, for numerous other passages lay out other standards, such as having faith, being willing to carry our cross, living in purity, forgiving others, and loving our neighbor, our enemy. But this passage does remind us that we are not to neglect the corporal works of mercy. Yes, Jesus our King is the strangest one you will ever meet, a caring and close king, a conquering king who never forces, a king who is hungry and thirsty, a king who reigns from the cross, a king who dies so that we don't have to, a king who washes our feet, a king who comes to serve rather than to be served. He is a king, all right, one who rules with love, not force. He is the strangest king you'll ever meet, and you meet him every day. In the Eucharist, in the poor, in his word, in your heart, in the events of your day, and in your very self.